The living entity wanted to enjoy the material energy, and to give the living entity all facility, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, created this material world and gave the living entity the facility to concoct different ideas and plans through the mind. These facilities offered by the Lord to the living entity constitute the 16 kinds of perverted support in terms of the knowledge-gathering senses, the working senses, the mind, and the 5 material elements.
Shri Advaita Gadadha Srivasadi Gaurabhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchikalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhyevacha Vritanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So Prahlad Maharaj, he's a 5-year-old boy, but he's got a very good grasp of the philosophy. And he's also more elevated than all the demigods, all the different controllers. They've all tried to offer prayers and they've failed to pacify Lord Nrsingadev. Ugram. Ugram means very ferocious. When Lord Nrsingadev first comes out, the Stamba, he's Ugram. And it's very hard to pacify him. He's just looking for blood. Just wants to rip somebody apart. Then after he's ripped her and he can actually go apart, then there's a chance you can try and pacify him now. But even the goddess of fortune was keeping out of the way. So that's how angry he was. But see, when it's a little child, then immediately your heart becomes soft. It's a 5-year-old boy. But at the same time, he was very clever. He was very elevated in his consciousness. Because he was 5 years in their years, but that may be a lot longer in terms of Prahlad Maharaj's situation. Prabhupada in the purport says, if the hand of the Supreme Personality of God is present in everything, where is the question from liberated from his no intention, aspiration, peaceful life? So that's an interesting question. If the hand of the Supreme Personality of God is present in everything, everything. And what's the question to liberate? And he's in charge of everything. And how can we get Krishna's got a grip, such a strong grip on everybody. And then some Prabhupada says, so where's the question of being liberated? All actually. That support comes in a perverted way. So he gives his knowledge-gathering senses, he gives his working senses, the mind, and the 5 material elements. The wheel of repeated birth and death is created by Krishna, but to direct the bewildered living entity in progress towards liberation, according to various stages of advancement. Different directions are given in the Vedas. So Krishna puts us here, he supports us still in the material world, and then he gives us directions in the form of the Vedas to help us get back out of the material world. If he didn't do that, then we wouldn't be able to. That's why the very initial statement is, if the hand of the Supreme Personality of God is present in everything, where's the question of being liberated? If he doesn't provide us with the Vedas, and he just leaves us here in the material world, then we haven't got a chance, basically. That's what it's meaning. So according to the stages, Chando Mayan. So sometimes with Indian people, they know something of the Vedas, but the stage that they want of the Vedas is the stage where Krishna is saying, do your responsibilities, do all your sacrifices, do all your punya, make sure you have sons, putra, so that they can deliver you from from hell. And in this way, they take care of all those, but they don't go back to Godhead in this lifetime. They maybe make some progress. And in Kali Yuga, it's very difficult because everyone's so confused. And we now see in India that they're more against Vedic principles than anybody practically, the way they're behaving. They're like, they're kind of naive about material life, and they look to the West and they see the glitter of the material energy and think, yeah, this is where we need to go. And then they reject 5,000 years of culture to go and get some rubbish plastic, little tinsely gadgets from the West And then the people in the West are suffering from so many different diseases and anxieties, frustrations, and they're looking toward the East. So the East is coming over to the West, and the West is going over to the East. There was a funny cartoon in The Simpsons, and there was the threat of an impending war, and everybody in the church ran into the pub, and everybody in the pub ran into the church. Quite funny. Pubs where people drink. So when people become afraid, then they take to religion. And people that are already religious, when things go wrong, then they lose faith. So then they go in the pub to get drunk. So the West is now looking toward the East, and the East is now looking toward the West. So hopefully they'll bump into each other halfway across. And the people in the West can say, I've just been there. I've got the T-shirt, forget it. And the people in the East can think, oh, actually, yeah, we've got an amazing culture. We know all about your diet, how to breathe properly, how to exercise, proper medicines to take. And we have a whole system of yoga and meditation to elevate your consciousness. So that's what Prabhupada, he started the Hare Krishna movement in the West because people in India, he just couldn't get through to them. And then he took his Westerners back to India, and then they were amazed that, wow, you've got so much material facility and you're giving up to take up our culture. And that's why if you meet Indian people in the West and you give them a Bhagavad Gita and tell them we're following Sanatana Dharma, we follow the 4 regulative principles, and we chant the holy names of God 2 hours every day, they're really impressed. They're like, wow, you guys are doing it. This is our culture, our heritage, and you guys have taken it better than we have. We're embarrassed. And you're telling us material life is a waste of time. So that's what the point I think Prabhupada is making, that you would not have a chance to get out of the material energy because Krishna is in control of everything. It's only because Krishna kindly gives us the Veda, and then he gives us a progressive stages, like in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. If you can't completely surrender to me, follow the regulative principles. If you can't do that, engage in acts of sacrifice. If you can't do that, cultivate knowledge. Or if you can't fix it down, so there's something that you can do. And then Prabhupada emphasizes that if you do take the Vedas, then you'll understand that worshipping the demigods, worshipping ghosts and spirits, or ancestors is not as good as to worship Krishna, because if you worship Krishna, you can leave the material world once and for all, which is the real purpose of the Vedas, to direct one back home, back to Godhead. But the living entity, not knowing the real goal of his life, wants to go sometimes here and sometimes there, and do sometimes this and do sometimes that. So of all the instructions Srila Prabhupada gave, the one that he gave the most was you should attend Mangalarti. And he went with the devotees one time to the Kumbh Mela, and the devotees weren't getting up because they were sick, and they were thinking, well, that's a good excuse. I'm feeling sick. Get off my back, But they were really sick. It wasn't that they were feeling a little bit sick, but then you saw them a couple of hours later, and they're walking around with no socks on, feeling fine. They were really sick. And still Srila Prabhupada wanted them there for Mangalarti. And the way he got them to do that, I was just reading in Giriraj Maharaj's offering in the Vyasa Puja book this morning. He got up and he had an ice cold bath, even though he was sick himself. And the devotees felt so guilty that they started getting up. And Mother Jamuna, she had hepatitis, and because there wasn't much room, they put her in a shelf in the bottom of a cupboard. And Prabhupada came to see her, asked her what's wrong. And then he brought her out the room, put her into a special place, and made sure that she had sugar juice every day, and she got well again. But that was the instruction that Prabhupada gave more than anything else: attend Mangalarti. It's there for a reason. We have deities here for a reason. If we don't turn up for deity greeting, we don't turn up for Mangalarti, it's an offense to the deities. You have to be really, really sick to not turn up for that. So the emphasis is being placed here to go home, back to Godhead. And if we don't consider that that's really that important, and we want to hang around here in the material world and make arrangements for our family or our ancestors or our demigods or ghosts and spirits, then we can do that, but then we'll stay here in the material world. And that's the confusing thing about spiritual life, is that all the time you're offered choice. Krishna never takes the choice away from you. Unless you pray, please Krishna, I'm such a nonsense, take away my choice. Put me in a situation where I have no choice and I have to just surrender to you. Krishna may do that. Depends how sincere you are. Or he may not. He may say, no. You come here to the material world because you want to be the enjoyer and the controller. So I'm giving you all facility. And unless you can convince Krishna that you want to go home this lifetime, then you won't have the strength to do it yourself. You'll need Krishna's help. And in that way, he wanders throughout the entire universe, imprisoned in various species and engaging in various activities. So the problem with desires is you may have the desire to be a king, but you don't have the punya to be a king. But because you have a strong desire to be a king, then you're put in charge of an ant nest, or an ant hill. So you're king of the ants or queen of the ants. So you got your desire fulfilled, but because you had such low punya, very little sukriti, then you had to be put into this type of situation. So if we can learn to become free from our desires rather than fulfilling them, then we can get out of the material world. But as long as we're trying to fulfill desires, those desires will create more desires, which will create more desires, and therefore will perpetuate our existence. Brahmanda Brahmati Konya Bhagavan Jiva. Only when we come across the Guru can we get free. Otherwise, we're loitering in the material world. It's an interesting expression, loiter, because if you see somebody loitering, they're not really doing anything productive. They're just wasting time. So people are going around getting big houses and big cars and big jobs and getting lots of money. But from a spiritual point of view, all they're doing is loitering in the material world. It's of no consequence. When they lose that form of life and they go into the body of an ant, it won't matter if you tell the ant, do you know that just a few days ago, you were the Prime Minister of Ethiopia? Like the ant doesn't have any consequence at all to the ant now in its present condition of life. So we don't take anything with us from this. So rather than getting so caught up, Prabhupada didn't like the devotees to listen to the news. And he said the reason why is because it makes the material world seem more real than it is. Janma Jajayatan Vyadatarata Chitesh Vigatswate Ne Brahma Hrida Adhikavi Mansurya Tejo Varimadam Vinimaya Itratu Sago Misha Damna Svena Siddharnarastiku Kam Sacham Param Dimahi. First verse of the Bhagvatam, it says, O my Lord Shri Krishna, Son of Master of all pervading personality, God, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon you because you are the primeval Lord and you're independent and you have created these material universes which, although they appear real, they are factually not. They've been made due to the influence of the three modes of material nature. So the very first prayer at the beginning of the Bhagavatam is to get free from this material energy and to stop seeing it as real, to start realizing it's not real, it has no permanent existence, therefore it is unreal. So we get the fortune of coming across a bona fide guru and he gives us the Bhakti-lata Bij. The Bhakti-lata Bij is the seed, and if you were to analyze what that Bhakti-lata Bij is, what the seed is, it's all the rules and the regulations of Vaidhi Bhakti. So if you get a seed and you cultivate it nicely, then you're following all the rules and regulations nicely. You're getting up on time, you're following these principles, you're chanting these mantras, all the things, you're doing it all. And if you're neglecting that, then the seed is not being cultivated. You may think that you have the seed, but the seed won't grow unless all the rules and regulations are attended to very nicely. Your devotional life won't grow. The ultimate conclusion is that one must surrender to the principles of Bhakti Yoga, and then one will gradually attain liberation. No other method of liberation from the material struggle is at all possible. Any questions, comments? Yes, Hare Krishna.
You said in the beginning that Krishna has a grip on this material nature.
Yeah.
Everything is going after the direction of Krishna.
Yeah.
And if we don't want to, we will not get out from this material.
Yeah.
But Krishna, why he will, because he's the father of all the living entities. So why he will want that someone will not get out from this material?
Yeah, that's why he gives the guru and he gives the scriptures, and he also personally comes down himself. But it's like he builds this prison to facilitate the living entity. The living entity wants to come into here. Durga is the fortress, so he wants to enjoy Durga. So Krishna's saying it's very inappropriate for you to try and enjoy Durga. She is Lord Shiva's consort. No, I want Durga. You've got Radharani. I want Durga. Okay, then. So then you come into the material world. Now, if it's just left at that, you're finished. That's you for eternity. But then Krishna's thinking, he doesn't really want that. He thinks he wants it, but it's just because he's being childish. I'm going to go into the Durga. I'm going to perform pastimes. And I'm going to leave scriptures to help him become attracted to me and come out. So he does that. But it still doesn't alter the fact that it's impossible. Daive shagunamai mamaya durachaya. Durachaya means it's impossible to overcome. It's just too tricky, the material energy. There's just so many things. Even when you do know what you should be doing in spiritual life, it's still very easy to get tripped up and do the wrong thing. It's so tricky. Shishikone Taimai Pashashiki Jai. Like personally speaking, we had a temple at the time in Pershore, and the temple was called Chaitanya College, and it was quite famous for making devotees. We had like quite a big Bhakti program. There was 20, maybe 30 of us, and there was always somebody joining every week. So I joined, and I noticed that as quickly as people were joining, they were leaving. They'd stay for a few months. They'd do this course called the Bhakti program, where you get trained how to put tilak on, how to play kartals, how to put your dhoti on. And they'd do that for 3 months. Then after 3 months, they'd just leave again. And at that time, Dhanavir Maharaj was in charge of the Bhakti program, and he started to become a little bit discouraged. He says, I'm working really hard to train these boys up to become devotees, and then after they've gone through all the training, they just leave again and go back to material life. So he stopped doing the Bhakti program, and he went somewhere else to do something else, and Rohini Nandan took over the Bhakti program. Rohini Nandan. Yeah, he's Prabhupada's disciple. And he took over and trained us up. So right from within the first few weeks of taking up Krishna consciousness, I realized that it wasn't going to be easy to stay, And out of all those devotees, 30 or 40, around the time I was there, there's only 1 or 2 left. So a very, very high fallout rate. For whatever reason, we're learning from our mistakes. But what it kind of indicates is that in terms of percentages, even if people become enlightened to some degree, and they become aware of the Bhakti Lata Bij, they get that seed, whether they'll continue to cultivate that seed, those rules and regulations, like we read in the Nectar of Ocean, paying your obeisances with one hand is an offense. So if you paying your obeisances with one hand, eventually you'll push the society to those. So unless we keep ourselves very strict, and that's what's happening now. Everybody wants to take it easy. Nobody wants to really be accountable. And it used to be that if you were sick, then that meant you didn't eat. If you were too sick to go to the morning program, then that meant you were too sick to eat. But if you were okay to eat, then you should be there at the morning program. You should be doing the full day service. That was the standard. Now it's all getting changed. Oh yeah, but I don't feel like doing that, and I feel like doing this. And then this way, the whole thing will become diluted, and then the Bhakti-lata beach will lose its potency to grow, because it needs to penetrate through the material energy, through the 8 coverings, then it needs to go through the Brahman, and then through Vaikuntha, and eventually it goes up to Goloka. So if anywhere along the way those roots are damaged, then it won't properly grow. So we have to be so attentive to all the rules and regulations. And material energy is saying, don't be slacking off, don't be so strict, don't be a fanatic, worry about this, think about that. Then everything will be fine. Do your duty when it's cold, when it's hot, without being disturbed. Comings and goings. Percentage of those that continue on their practice lifetime. Only a small percentage. Most of them are same time she's got the culture and the breeding to know that she should be chased. So she's being challenged. She's being forced into a situation where she's making herself a target for unscrupulous men. And she should be under the protection of her father or elder brothers or her husband. But she's being exploited like this. So that's why it was so nice yesterday to go out and give everybody the holy name. Because everybody that had the holy name yesterday, they're guaranteed a human birth in the next life. And if you keep getting a human birth, then you learn. When you lose the human life and you become an animal or an insect, then when you come back, you have to learn everything again. But if you get a human life and another human life and another human life, then you start learning. You start becoming aware. You had a bad experience with this, you had a bad experience with that. So you become averse to certain activities because you've gone through punishment for those in between your lives, but then you get the human birth again. And then over a period of that, those lifetimes, then you start to, eventually one of the lifetimes you become very serious about spiritual life. And that's the lifetime that you can make it the last lifetime. Until you're serious, like we were reading this morning, Kadamba Kanmaraj was saying chanting is never casual. It's core activity. It's the essential activity. So if you can't get serious about your chanting, then it means you can't be very serious about anything else in the spiritual life. And you see that with some devotees, they come and they chant, but they don't really catch what it is. They kind of chant, doing it, but they're not really in the groove. They're not really in the lila when they're chanting, actually really getting into it. What the holy name is, you know. It's the door into the rasa dance. They're not aware of that at all. And how long can you chant like that before you give up? You have to get to the point where you realize chanting is so important. If you don't get to that point, however long it takes you to get to that point, you're in danger of discontinuing it. Any questions or comments? Yeah, it was a good question. We do a japa sangha on Thursday, and what the idea of the exercise is that if you just sit down with any group of devotees and you start talking about the holy name, then the holy name will be pleased. And if the holy name is pleased, when you're chanting the holy name will come to you. The holy name is not pleased, then when you're chanting, the holy name will be elusive, and the mind won't be able to connect. Or actually, you'll connect to the mind, but you won't connect to the holy name. The mind is just all your worries and speculations and memories and preconceived ideas of what's going to take place, but it's not really reality. So to push past the mind and connect with the reality of the holy name, we need the holy name to be pleased with us. And japa sangha just means you get together with, if you don't do the japa sangha with me, you decide, okay, I'm just going to sit down with a few devotees in the Brahmacharya shrine, and for half an hour on Wednesday night, we're just going to talk about chanting. It will immediately improve your chanting, I guarantee it, immediately. And if you're thinking, I don't need to improve my chanting is good enough, then you're in a big illusion. The only time you're chanting, well, actually, if your chanting was really good, then you wouldn't be able to stop chanting. If it was really good, you wouldn't be able to stop, because it would be so relishable. You'd be desiring thousands and thousands of miles and millions of years. And you'd be dancing in the courtyard of the heart. Chita Kandana Sangari. Kiyada Amritai, how much nectar is there in Krishnati Rai, Vanadvai, in those two symbols, Krishna, not in Prashada, in Krishna. If you're here for the Prashada but not for the holy name, then you've missed the boat. We have Prashadam, we have the morning program, we have the reading, but all of it is a waste of time unless you can chant properly. Because at the time of death, you won't be trying to eat Prashadam. You'll be trying to say Krishna. And if you don't, then you'll be coming back. You won't be passing out a book or collecting a donation. You'll be right lying there. The only thing you'll be able to do is chant Krishna. And if you do it, then you'll see Krishna. If you say Prashadam and you start trying to eat a pakora, you may just choke on the pakora. So we need to, it's okay to read and remember verses, but it's only really through discussion that we can actually learn, we can actually understand. And if we can discuss with all the devotees, then that's all the better. But for your japa to improve, you need to take some time out and talk about the holy name and really understand what is it. Understand you're not doing it properly, and try to understand what it would be like if you were chanting it properly, and aspire for that. Have a clear idea of the sadhya. If you're doing sadhana and you don't know what the sadhya is, what the goal is, what the perfection is, then the sadhana is like running around, but you don't quite know where it is that you're going. So you need to establish, this is where I want to go, and therefore I'm engaging in this activity, sambandha Abhidaya and then Prayojana. You need to know what it is that you're going, what you're aspiring for. If you don't have that Prayojana, then you can be doing all the Sambandha and Abhidaya running around, but you're not really getting there. So it's interesting, if you worship demigods, you take birth amongst them. If you worship ghosts and spirits, so it's interesting that it's Deva and then Pitran. First of all, demigods, then ghosts and spirits. So Bhuta. Yanti Devarata Devan Pitran Yanti Patravata Bhutani Yanti Bhutesha Yanti Mam Yashanopimam. So that's your choice. You've got choices. You can worship demigods, ghosts and spirits, ancestors, Krishna, and because in the West they don't know anything about ghosts and spirits and demigods and ancestors, then you've got either Krishna or you've got footballers or singers or actors. You can worship them. And isn't it funny that although, compared to a demigod, how useless is a footballer? But when you've got no other choice, you've got to worship somebody, then you worship a footballer. I remember seeing sprayed on the wall one time, David Bowie is God. And I was only about 14 at the time. I was thinking, how can he be God? He didn't create anything, just sang a few songs. And you think, that's pretty feeble for God, So when you've got nothing else, you don't know who God is, then you just worship some fool, And how's that going to help you at the time of death? David Bowie. You don't even know who he is. So he's forgotten. He's inconsequential. Whereas Krishna, everyone knows about Krishna for thousands of years. So we need to give people the alternative so that they don't waste their time. And then if they don't worship a footballer, then they go for their dog. Okay, well, let me just worship the dog. I'll pick its stool up. I'll look after it. I'll take it everywhere. Paul was telling me yesterday that since COVID, there's been a huge boom in dogs. There's dogs everywhere. Everywhere you go in Scotland, there's people, and some of them not just got one dog, they've got like 4 dogs. And there's stool everywhere. So they're worshipping their dog. So how much shelter can you get from dog worship? If you're really upset about something, I'm just going to stroke my dog, give it something to eat. That's their only shelter. So, and there's so much shelter you can get from Krishna. And when you're actually chanting nicely and you're really hearing and you're really feeling Krishna's presence and the sound of his holy name, it's like, wow, okay, that's my fear of death taken away now. I know you're there, Krishna. And I know that if I chant at the time of death, you'll be there for me. That's shelter. And nobody's getting that from demigod worship, pop star worship, dog worship, wife worship, children worship. You're not going to get that. You're not going to get that shelter. You'll stay in anxiety. Manda samanda matya mandam. Prana paisa sabya kala vesna yudanjana. Manda samanda matya manda bhagya yupadruta. Yupadruta means always disturbed. In this age of Kali, man is short-lived, lazy person, unlucky, misguided, and above all, always disturbed. Any last questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much for your kind attention. Iskon Guru ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Granth Srimad Bhagvatam ki, Gaura Premanandi.